You saw those 3 people jump a lady jogger.
I see. But I heard a lady scream on her way down.
Justice for Central Park 5. Overturn the conviction.
Shalom, Lord in Christ. This is Officer Shargapan of the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge. Started out at 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under commanding General Yohana. And since 1969, we've been teaching the truth according to this Bible and nothing but this truth. We don't believe in any other nonsense that's not according to the Bible, right? So I'm pretty sure you see the title, the Central Park 5. Today, a few brothers and myself, Officer Aishaya Allah, who's in the room holding down Shamar and the computer, and Officer Parataza from Yonkers. We actually went down to Foley Square today, where they were having a wrongful conviction rally. And some of the organizations that actually helped the brothers, the men in the Central Park 5, who are now called the Exonerated 5, were down there. The Innocence Project and Vocal New York, I believe. So what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be going through the history of the Central Park 5, and we're going to talk about the history of wrongful convictions, not just here in New York, but for all over this country, right? So what I first want to do, I want you to go to the Wikipedia link and share. You can share this, and we're going to start reading this, all right? Make sure everyone can see this. That's perfect, just like that. No, go back. Just like that. Good.
The Central Park Jogger case, sometimes termed the Central Park 5 case, was a criminal case concerning the assault and rape of Tricia Miley, woman in Central Park, Manhattan, New York, on April 19th, 1989.
Stop. Now, Tricia Miley was a white woman, right? Was a blonde-haired white woman who was also a banker at a financial institution. Keep going.
On the night of the attack, dozens of teenagers had entered the park, and there were reports of muggings and physical assaults.
So during this day on April 19th, going into April 20th, you had a bunch of Black and Hispanic kids, all young, ranging from 13 to 16 to 17, coming from right here, East Harlem. Actually 2 blocks away from where I grew up, at the 110th Street location of Central Park North, is where they actually entered into the park, and that's where everything began, right? Keep going.
6 teenagers were indicted in relation to the Miley assault. Charges against one, Stephen Lopez, were dropped after Lopez pleaded guilty to a different assault.
So there was a 6th member that was caught up in regards to the horrendous events that took place to this white woman here. However, Stephen Lopez ended up pleading guilty to different assaults, so the charges that will be brought against the Central Park 5 were never brought up against Lopez here. Keep going.
The remaining 5, Antron McCray,
A black man,
Kevin
a
Richardson,
black man.
Yusef Salam,
Now, Yusuf Salam, it's up for debate. Officer Hazahab and I actually got to meet and interview Yusuf Salam back in 2018 at Pace University, where I graduated from. I think it was 2016, 2017. We actually met Yusuf Salam. I want to say that he is a brother, but he is a Muslim. So let's just call Yusuf Salam another person. He's just another person that got caught up in the Central Park 5. Keep going.
Raymond Santana,
A brother,
and Corey Wise,
another brother.
known as the Central Park 5.
Now, these 5 men, or should I say young boys at this time, teenagers, were all caught up and labeled the Central Park 5. This was a big case in 89, 90, 91, 92, especially in the early 2000s when they were able to become exonerated from the charges that they were convicted of. Keep going.
Later, the exonerated 5 were convicted of the charged offenses and served sentences ranging from 7 to 13 years.
Now, these children, my children, your neighbor's children, did serve time in prison. I'm not talking about regular jail. I'm talking about prison. One of these boys actually spent, I believe, 13 years in an adult facility. Only him and God knows all the horrors and horrendous things he had to endure and witness. Not just him, but all the other guys here that were part of the Central Park 5. Keep going.
More than a decade after the attack, while incarcerated for
Say it again?
attack, more than a decade after the attack,
So after a decade that this incident happened, that this horrendous sexual violation to this white woman happened, a decade later, keep going.
while incarcerated for attacking 5 other women in 1989, serial rapist Matthias Reyes.
So Matthias Reyes, who was a serial sexual violator, a serial sexual offender, right? He was incarcerated at this time as well for attacking 5 other women. Keep going.
confessed.
He did what?
Confessed.
So we have the Central Park 5. We have Antron McCray, Kevin Richardson, Yusuf Salam, Raymond Santana, and Corey Wise in prison, all serving time, all being labeled horrendous things, and we're going to get to that as well. While this person here, Matthias Reyes, actually confesses a decade later, 10 years later, he confesses what?
To the Miley assault and claimed he was the only actor. DNA evidence confirmed his involvement.
So he came forward and actually divulged that he was the person that horrendously attacked and violated this white woman, and only he was involved in this incident. And there was DNA evidence to support and corroborate his story. Keep going.
The convictions against McCray, Richardson, Salam, Santana, and Wise were vacated in 2002.
So in 2002, you got McCray, Richardson, Salam, Santana, and Wise. All their convictions, all the charges that were against them were vacated, were dropped, were let go. Keep going.
Lopez's convictions were vacated in July 2022.
Lopez, the other individual that wasn't charged with these 5, his convictions were vacated as well. Keep going.
From the outset, the case was a topic of national interest.
Now, it was of national interest, right? You got to think about it. This period of time, the 70s, the 80s, the early 90s, was a very hectic time. There was great racism and discrimination happening in all major cities where Black, Hispanic, and Native American people lived at, worked at, slept at, tried their best to survive. Now let's include extreme poverty. Now let's include the introduction to drug use, like crack cocaine, heroin, other words for these drugs, base, all these things were greatly affecting and contributing to the environment that Black, Hispanic, and Native American people had to endure and survive during these time periods in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Keep going.
From the outset, the case was a topic of national interest.
And everyone had an opinion on this particular case. Even former President Donald Trump, who is now facing his own criminal charges in court today, because we also saw parts of the supporters and anti-supporters of Trump down at 60 Center Street, where Trump was having to answer for crimes that he's being accused of doing while he was a president and even before being a president. Keep going.
Initially, it fueled public discourse about New York City's perceived lawlessness, criminal behavior by youths, and violence toward women. After the exonerations, the case became a prominent example of racial profiling, discrimination, and inequality in the legal system and the media.
Now, it said that this fueled public discourse about New York City's perceived, their thought, their idea, their image of how they look at New York City's lawlessness, people acting outside the law, not caring about the law, right? Criminal behavior by youth, labeling Black, Hispanic, and Native American youth as criminals, as savages, as super predators, as Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton described, super predators. Go back, Bubba Shah, right? And violence towards women, and all the violence that's been that was happening towards women, all different types of sexual assaults against women. However, this case was a bombshell, right? Because it exposed and brought to light that even though the world, even though New York City, even though the DA and the police department of New York City thought that there was such great lawlessness, there was such great criminal behavior amongst Black, Hispanic, and Native American youth, and even though they thought that violence towards women was at an uprise, right? It proved that the NYPD were racially profiling Black, Hispanic, and Native American people. It proved that the prosecution and the DA, the district attorney's office in New York City, was actually racially profiling Black, Hispanic, and Native American people. It showed that the media throughout the entire state of New York and the entire country, right, that they were racially profiling Black, Hispanic, and Native American people, not just here in New York City, but all over the country, from LA to Detroit to Chicago down to Texas, all these different areas, right? It brought forth and shed light on the discrimination that takes place against Black, Hispanic, and Native American youths, men, women, and children. Because when you dig further into this particular case, you'll see great gross levels of racial profiling and discrimination. And most importantly, the inequality and the lack of access and the horrendous treatment that us as Black, Hispanic, and Native American people face when going through the legal system here, not only in New York, but the entire country of the United States of America. Keep going.
All 5 defendants sued the city of New York.
What did they do?
Sued the city of New York.
So after they were exonerated, they all got together and sued the city of New York. Keep going.
For malicious prosecution.
Malicious prosecution. Click that and let's see what that means.
Malicious prosecution is a common law intentional tort. Like the tort of abuse of process, its elements include 1, intentionally instituting and pursuing a legal action that is 2, brought without probable cause.
There was no probable cause to incriminate and incarcerate these 5 young men. No probable cause. DNA evidence didn't match. Their initial stories were completely different from the coercion and the film recording of their so-called tape confessions, right? Keep going.
And 3, dismissed in favor of the victim of the malicious prosecution.
And no one cared about the story of these 5 young men. No one cared to see whether they were telling the truth. No one cared that the DNA evidence didn't match. All that mattered was that a blonde hair white woman who's rich and has wealth, who was a financial baker, right? Who was an athlete because she liked to jog and compete in marathons and races, right? That she was horrendously sexually violated in the middle of the night, left for dead, lost 75 to 80% of her blood, was in a concussion, was in a coma, had a concussion, was in a coma for 12 days after they found her. They found her lifeless, body freezing in the cold in Central Park. All they cared about was this white woman. And they did not care about these 5 young men of color who had to go through such traumatic experience with this legal system. They had to go through forced coercion of their stories. They had to go hours without rest, without food, without drinks, not being able to see their parents, right? These children were taken advantage of all because they were children of color, and the victim was a white woman.
Right.
Keep going. You can actually go back. You can leave that screen. Right? Keep going. After malicious prosecution.
Racial discrimination and emotional distress. The city settled the suit in 2014 for $41 million.
So after all the years that each man spent incarcerated, after the turmoil that they had to go through and endure throughout the whole entire legal proceedings, the trauma that they faced while incarcerated, while being interrogated, while having the whole world and white America demify them, right? Call them monsters and savages and marauders and call them a wolf pack, right? They won $41 million, which does not replace the amount of years that they all had to spend falsely incarcerated. The $41 million does not replace all the memories and times that they missed spending with their family.
Right.
The $41 million does not replace the time that they lost from school, from quality education, from missed opportunities, from college education, from going and joining the workforce and pursuing a career. This $41 million does not replace that. Right?
Right.
So what I want you to do, let's talk a little bit of the history behind this case. You can start from there at 9 p.m.
At 9 p.m. on April 19th, 1989, a group of an estimated 20 to 32 teenagers who lived in East Harlem entered Manhattan's Central Park at an entrance in Harlem near Central Park North. Some of the group committed several attacks, assaults, and robberies against people who were either walking, biking, or jogging in the northernmost part of the park near the reservoir, and victims began to report the incidents to police.
So these five teenagers joined a bigger group of people, of other teenagers, of other kids, and the entire group was going throughout Central Park, right? And some of the teenagers were committing crimes, like it just said here. Several attacks, assaults, robberies, right? They were harming people, right? Skip down, keep going, skip down, keep going, keep going, keep going. Start where it says the assault of Trisha Miley.
Trisha Ellen Miley, a 29-year-old, was going for a regular run in Central Park shortly before 9 p.m. While jogging, she was knocked down, dragged nearly 300 feet off the roadway, and violently, physically, and sexually assaulted. About 4 hours later at 1:30 a.m., she was found naked, gagged, tied, and covered in mud and blood in a shallow ravine about 300 feet north of the 102nd Street crossing, a wooded area of the park.
So this white woman had gone through a traumatic, horrendous experience right here that she doesn't even remember. She was violently, physically, and sexually assaulted, right? They found her naked. They found her gagged. They found her tied up, and she was covered in mud in a shallow ravine right there on 300 feet north of the 102nd Street crossing. I don't know if you've ever gone into Central Park, but there's a crossing that you can cross over into the wooded areas. They're right now. They're probably located by the baseball fields that are there currently. Keep going.
The first policeman who saw her said she was beaten as badly as anybody I've ever seen beaten. She looked like she was tortured. Miley was so badly injured that she was in a coma for 12 days. She had severe hypothermia, severe brain damage, severe hemorrhagic shock, loss of 75 to 80% of her blood, and internal bleeding. Her skull had been fractured so badly that her left eye was dislodged from its socket, which in turn was fractured in 21 places. The path of her feet dragged through the grass was marked so clearly that it could be photographed. It was 18 inches wide.
So listen, this white woman suffered and had to go through a horrendous ordeal, right? No woman, black, white, Asian, Japanese, Indian, no woman should have to suffer any type of sexual violence and be sexually violated by anyone. Same things goes for men. This is why here in the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge, we raise men,
right,
to abstain from acts like this. We do our best to win the minds of Black, Hispanic, and Native American men that they should have greater pride in themselves, that if they don't want something happening to them, that they should not cause these events to happen to others. And since we all have mothers, sisters, daughters, grandmothers, we would not want any woman to have to experience such horrendous events, such a horrendous attack, right? Now, I want you to go down to the arrest and investigations.
The police were dispatched at 9:30 p.m. and responded with scooters and unmarked cars. Because it was initially determined that Miley would likely die from her injuries, the police treated the attack as a probable homicide. The severely beaten Miley was not found until 1:30 a.m. on April 20th. Her discovery increased the urgency of police efforts to apprehend suspects. Ultimately, police took 20 suspects into custody. 10 were ultimately tried for the attacks.
Keep going.
Police took custody of Raymond Santana and Kevin Richardson, both 14 years of age.
How old?
14 years of age.
So Raymond Santana and Kevin Richardson were both 14 years old. Keep going.
Along with 3 other teenagers at approximately 10:15 p.m. on Central Park West and 102nd Street. Stephen Lopez, 15, was arrested with this group within an hour of the several attacks that were first reported to police. He was also interrogated. Antron McCray, 15, Yusuf Salam, 15, and Corey Wise.
So Raymond Santana, Kevin Richardson, Antron McCray, Yusuf Salam, and Corey Wise were 14, 15, and 16 years of age when this event happened. Keep going.
Were brought in for questioning later that day after having been identified by other youths in a large group as participants in or present at some of the attacks on other victims.
Let's get down to the next paragraph.
4 of the 6 lived at the Schaumburg Plaza, 1309 Fifth Avenue.
That was 3 blocks away from where I lived, where I spent the first 18 years of my life. Schaumburg Plaza, it completely changed now. It went from red buildings to an ugly gray building now. They got repainted or something, and it's extremely gentrified, right? But these 4 of the 6 came and lived in the Schaumburg Plaza right there on 110th Street between 5th Avenue and Madison Avenue. Keep going.
At the northeast corner of Central Park near 110th Street. 2 lived further north of there. The ones at Schaumburg included friends Salam and Wise, who lived in the Northwest Tower, and Kevin Richardson and Stephen Lopez, who lived elsewhere in the complex. They had seen each other in the neighborhood. The Schomburg was a large mixed-income complex with two 35-story towers and an associated multi-story rectangular building.
Stop. Listen, with my experience of growing up, Schaumburg was a pretty rough complex to live in. You had a lot of gang activity there. You also had a lot of drug activity that was happening there, right? Now, I'll skip down to the last sentence in this particular section.
Analysis indicated that none of the suspects' DNA matched either of the two DNA samples collected from the crime scene.
Pay very close attention, right? Because this is one of the reasons why so many Black, Hispanic, and Native American people, and other people with different races as well, this is why there are so many wrongfully incarcerated and wrongfully convicted people in prison throughout the entire United States because of faulty DNA evidence, because of evidence that is not thoroughly vetted by so-called specialists, right? Is because of this. Their DNA did not match any of the two DNA samples that were collected from the scene of the crime. And despite knowing this, the DA still decided to persecute and prosecute these 5 young men.
Right.
Keep going. You can go down to the confessions. Listen to this right here, because this is another reason why there are so many wrongfully convicted people in prison right now.
Salaki, just to finish that sentence, even though none of the suspects' DNA matched, results were reported as inconclusive by the police. Confessions. The videotape confessions started on April 21st.
Now, they had and presented videotape confessions from all 5 of these young men, these children, right? Keep going.
After the detectives finished unrecorded interrogations.
They did what?
Finished unrecorded interrogations.
So after they finished interrogating them for God knows how long, which were not recorded. No one knows. There is no evidence, no video evidence to show what these young children were going through while they were being interrogated until they decided to record the aftermath of them agreeing to confess to a crime they did not commit.
Right.
Keep going.
During which the 5 suspects were in custody for at least 7 hours.
That means they were in custody for a minimum of 7 hours. Imagine a young child, a young teenager, 14, 15. You can't even sit in your seat longer than 30 minutes before you got to get up and do something, right? They had to spend a minimum of 7 hours in police custody going through these unrecorded interrogations before they had a recorded confession through this interrogation. Right. Keep going.
Santana, McCrae, and Richardson made video statements in the presence of parents.
So Santana, McCrae, and Richardson were on camera confessing to a crime they did not do in front of their parents. Now, this is extremely important because we need more parents to fight for their children. Right? More importantly, we need more parents to be active in their children's lives and to raise them correctly.
Right.
To monitor their behaviors and activities more and actually care. Because in today's day, the youth, Black, Hispanic, and Native American youth in today's day and age are out of control. Right? This is part of the reasons why the mayor has called upon the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge under commanding General Yohana to help with decreasing gun violence throughout the 5 boroughs of New York City. This is why Washington, D.C. is now calling upon houses of worship like the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge to help decrease gun violence throughout the entire nation. And that is why the ISUPK is in almost every single state you can imagine. And we will assist and give the solutions that our political leaders, the people who run and rule this country, we will give them the solutions and show them how men of God, real men of God, can decrease not only gun violence, but change the lives of all Black, Hispanic, and Native Americans here in the United States. Keep going.
Wise made several statements unaccompanied by any parent, guardian, or counsel.
Now, Wise, I believe that was the oldest brother, the 16-year-old, right? If I'm not mistaken, scroll up real quick.
God, it was.
One more. Corey Wise. Keep going. He was 16 at the time. He had no legal representation. He had no parents there, no guardian there, and he made statements and confessed to crimes he did not commit. Keep going.
Lopez was interviewed on videotape in the presence of his parents on April 21st, 1989, beginning at 3:30 a.m. He named others of the group by first names in the group attacks on other persons, but denied any knowledge of the female jogger. None of the 6 had defense attorneys during the interrogations or videotape process.
No one had counsel. No one had lawyers present during these interrogations, both unrecorded and recorded. Keep going.
The 5 told police they had been part of a makeshift group of about 30 people, some of whom had committed various crimes, some of who had merely observed those crimes. According to a later statement by District Attorney Nancy Ryan, all 5 implicated themselves in a number of the crimes which had occurred in the park. While the accounts offered of the crimes beside the rape were accurate, their accounts of the rape contained discrepancies as to when, where, and how it happened.
So even their stories, when they were confessing to be associated or take part in this rape, even their stories of how the sexual violation of this woman happened, when it happened, where it happened, how it happened, was all completely different. Each one said when, why, who, where, what, all different accounts. And none of that was taken into consideration when trying to pinpoint who was the actual offender in the sexual violation of this white woman. Keep going.
Only Wise made any statement about the different times and locations of the jogger attack, and detectives had taken Wise to the park to observe the crime scene before he made his videotaped confession.
So, for Wise, they wanted to make sure that he can give more accurate information. So what did they do to Corey Wise? They took him to the location of where the crime happened so he can observe the crime scene, so they can show him where the woman was dragged, right? They can show him where the woman was laying there in a pool of mud and blood combination. They can show the environment so Corey Wise can then go back, give a fake confession, but include factual details that can help put the piece of the stories together. Keep going.
None of the 5 said that he had raped the jogger.
What?
None of the 5 said that he had raped the jogger.
None of these 5 young men, these teenagers, none of them said they raped the jogger. They sexually violated the jogger. Keep going.
But each confessed to having...
Sorry, keep going.
But each confessed to having been an accomplice. Each youth said that he had only helped restrain the jogger or touched her sexually, while one or more others had raped her.
Right? Insane. Keep going.
Their confessions varied as to who they identified as having participated in the rape.
All their confessions couldn't pinpoint on who was the actual perpetrator or perpetrators that committed this gross sexual attack on this woman. Keep going.
Including naming several youths who were never questioned.
They ended up naming a bunch of other people that they didn't even know was actually there at the scene of the crime, that they didn't even know who was actually a part of the crime. They were just naming regular names of people that they knew, that they saw was with them in that group when they entered Central Park. Keep going.
In his untaped confession, Salam went the furthest in admitting some culpability, claiming to have struck the jogger with a pipe at the beginning of the incident.
And Salam gave a false confession, admitting that he actually harmed and struck the jogger. Keep going.
Although 4 suspects, all except Salam, confessed on
They
videotape
gave false confessions on videotape.
in the presence of a parent or guardian who had generally not been present during the interrogations, each of the 4 retracted his statements within weeks.
You know why? Because if you're not guilty of something, why admit to it? You put children in the most grueling conditions. We all hear stories of how police officers interrogate those who they think are criminals. We all hear stories of them being tortured, being beaten, being starved, right? Under constant hostile interrogating circumstances. Now you're doing that to children. You have police veterans, 20 years on the force, 30 years on the force, using these interrogating tactics on children. And you do not think that a week from now, 2 weeks from now, that these children will not say, no, we actually did not do it. We were put under these conditions and we were scared. We were told we would be let go. We were told that we would be free if we just gave a confession. Our parents finally got counsel and decided that we didn't do it and that we should say we didn't do it. You did this to children. The NYPD has done this to children for decades.
Right.
Law enforcement in America has been doing this to Black, Hispanic, and Native American men, women, and children for centuries. Since the plantations, white America has been using the most heinous acts to falsely accuse, to falsely imprison, and to carry out wrongful punishments to Black, Hispanic, and Native American people. And this was a prime example that happened right here in the late 80s, early 90s. What these 5 young children had to go through. Keep going.
Together they claimed that they had been intimidated.
You know what?
Intimidated.
Now they're telling the truth, right? They were what?
Intimidated.
Because that's what the NYPD and that is what all law enforcement all over this country do.
Right.
When they're trying to coerce a confession, whether you're innocent or guilty, whether there was probable cause for your arrest or not. They do what? They were what?
Intimidated.
What else?
Lied to.
They were what?
Lied to.
You know, it is actually legal. Let me look at, because I looked this up a long time ago, right? That law enforcement in America are legally allowed to lie to people.
Absolutely.
Let's look this up real quick. It goes right here. According to the innocentproject.org, where it says the article is entitled 5 Facts About Police Deception and Youth You Should Know. It says right here, number 1, it is almost always legal for police to lie during interrogations. Police have long been prohibited from using physical force during interrogations. So police are not allowed to use violence to coerce a confession during interrogations, but they are still allowed to use a variety of powerful psychological ploys to extract confessions from people. For example, law enforcement can lie to a defendant and say their friend or alleged co-defendant confessed, saying they committed the crime together, even when that person has not confessed to anything. They are legally allowed to lie. Now, where's that court case? You got something?
And if I could, we're about to see an incredible example of that in this case.
Let's that's enough of that. Keep going. They were intimidated. They were lied to. What else?
And coerced.
They were what?
And coerced.
They were talked into
by police into making false confessions.
And they were told to give false confessions. Keep going.
While the confessions were videotaped, the hours of interrogation that preceded the confessions were not.
So the intimidation that the police did use against these children wasn't recorded. The police lying to these young children for all these hours were not recorded, right? The coercion that the police used to try to get these kids to confess, all their tactics that they employed to get these confessions were not recorded. And only after hours and hours of long interrogation did they finally get videotaped confessions which were false. Keep going.
When taken into custody, Salam told the police he was 16 years old and showed them identification to that effect. If a suspect had reached 16 years of age, his parents or guardians no longer had a right to accompany him during police questioning or to refuse to permit him to answer any questions. After Salam's mother arrived at the station, she insisted that she wanted a lawyer for her son, and the police stopped the questioning. He neither made a videotape nor signed the earlier written statement, but the court ruled to accept it as evidence before his trial.
So no matter what, even though he didn't use a videotape, even though they did not have videotape confession, and even though he did not sign to earlier statements made, they used whatever they got out of him prior to his mother and lawyer coming. They still used it in court. Keep going.
Detective Tom McKenna falsely told Detective Tom McKenna,
this monster of a man,
falsely told Salam that
he lied,
that his fingerprints had been found on the victim's clothing. McKenna reported that Salam subsequently confessed to being present at the scene of the rape.
Who wouldn't? What child would not come out with some confession after hours of being interrogated and then being told, we know you did it? You know the fingerprints on the tips of your fingers? They were found at the scene of the crime. Your DNA was found on the victim. We have proof, scientific proof. Your DNA that matches with you was found on this woman. We know what you did to this woman. We just need you to confess to doing it now. Let the truth set you free. Admit to the crimes that you did, but it was all a lie. Keep going.
Years later, Salam said, I would hear them beating up Corey Wise in the next room.
What?
I would hear them beating
Salam
up.
said he made a statement that he can hear, keep going,
them beating up Corey Wise in the next room.
They did what to Corey Wise?
Beating up.
Listen, he said out of Salam's own mouth, I can hear them abusing a child. Because that's what that is. They were abusing this child.
Right.
They were abusing this young teenager. They were beating him up right there in the next room. Imagine what he heard. Corey Wise screaming in pain, in agony, for them to stop. Hearing the sounds and the thuds of them attacking this young child, this teenager. Keep going.
And they would come and look at me and say, you realize you're next.
And then they would enter his room after he can hear what they were doing to Corey Wise and say, you're next. Imagine the fear of a kid when they know their dad is going to whoop them with a belt. Come on, we all know that fear where your parents said is gonna beat you for doing something wrong. Now he's hearing these white police officers abuse, beat, harm this other teenager in the next room, and now they're coming in and saying they're gonna do the same thing to you. Keep going.
The fear made me feel really like I was not going to be able to make it out.
What did the fear do to Yusuf Salam?
Made me feel really like I was not going to be able to make it out.
Yusuf Salam in his head, after all the psychological ploys that the NYPD were committing and using against these innocent children, these innocent teenagers, he thought to himself, I wasn't going to make it out. Keep going.
Within 2 weeks of their confessions, each of the 5 recanted. They argued that their statements were coerced by police
Because they were.
and that their rights to counsel and Miranda warnings had been violated.
Yes, they were. Go down to wait, go back, scroll back up. Stay right there. Let's read what the press had to say, because the press, the media, had a great part in the demonizing of these young, innocent teenagers. Keep going. Scroll up, right there.
On April 21st, senior police investigators held a press conference to announce having apprehended about 20 suspects in the attacks of a total of 9 people in Central Park 2 nights before, and began to offer their theory of the attack and rape of the female jogger. Her name was withheld as a victim of a sex crime. The police said up to 12 youths were believed to have attacked the jogger. The main suspects were a subgroup within the loose gang of 30 to 32 teenagers who had assaulted strangers in the park as part of an activity that the police said the teenagers referred to as wilding.
And that was one of the main words that were used to dehumanize and demonize these teenagers that night. Wilding. Keep going.
New York City senior detectives said the term was used by the suspects when describing their actions to the police.
Now, what they're really trying to say is wilding. We were wilding out there. We were just acting crazy, having fun.
Right.
I'm pretty sure, I grew up here in East Harlem, in Spanish Harlem. I understand when someone says we were wilding.
Right.
Not wilding. Not what they forced the media, what they had the media use, and what the media portrayed to the entire country, the nation, what they were doing. They were not acting like animals. They were not acting like a pack of wild wolves. They were not acting like marauders. They were just wilding. They had a good time, yelling, screaming, running around, throwing rocks at each other. However, some were more mischievous than others and did cause some harm to other people. Keep going.
New York City senior detectives said the term was used by the suspects when describing their actions to police. The police described the actions as random and motiveless, saying they had terrorized people in the park.
Now, again, some of these teenagers were causing harm to innocent people for no reason. But there's no proof to show that every single child, every single teenager there was involved in these offenses. Keep going.
The account of the term wilding was soon disputed by investigative reporter Barry Michael Cooper, who said that it originated in a police detective's misunderstanding of the suspect's use of the phrase "doing the wild thing," lyrics from rapper Tone Loc's hit song "Wild Thing."
So they got it from a song. Now let's see what the media had to say.
At a time of concern about crime in general in the city, which was suffering high rates of assaults, rapes, and homicides, these attacks provoked great outrage.
Now, during this time in 89, 90, 91, and one of those years, the rates of people who were being unalived were, I believe, like 1,980 something, almost close to 2,000 at one point during that year. Keep going.
Particularly the brutal rape of the female jogger. It took place in the public park that is mythologized as the city's verdant democratic refuge. New York Governor Mario Cuomo told the New York...
Who is a sexual offender.
Right.
Let's keep that in mind. Ex-Governor Cuomo, right? Mario Cuomo? Or is that his brother?
His father.
His father. Well, Andrew Cuomo's father raised a sexual offender.
Right.
Because Governor Cuomo, that had to step down from being the governor of New York State, was reported and alleged to doing very inappropriate sexual things to women. We had a time where people were being sexually assaulted and violated. His father, Mario Cuomo, was the governor during this time. Decades later, his son, who's also the governor, was doing the same thing. Keep going.
Told the New York Post, this is the ultimate shriek of alarm. Normal police procedures stipulated that the names of criminal suspects under the age of 16 were to be withheld from the media.
Go to the next paragraph.
By that time, more information had been published about the primary suspects in the rape who did not seem to satisfy typical profiles of perpetrators.
Not because these are teenagers, they're children. Keep going.
Reporters had found that some came from stable, financially secure families.
Which is rare. Like, how could a child who's being raised in two-parent households or being raised by secure, financially stable households, it's pretty alarming and questioning that they would be part of such a heinous act and being charged with such serious crimes. Keep going.
Police had ruled out drugs or major robbery, and most had no criminal records.
They ruled out drugs. They weren't on drugs. There was no major robberies happening amongst these families, right? Most had no criminal records. Keep going.
On April 26, 1989, the New York Times published a cautionary editorial against the use of labels.
What did they do?
Published a cautionary editorial against the use of labels and questioning why such well-adjusted youngsters could have committed such a savage crime.
Good job for you, New York Times. But try not lying in your articles more often.
Right.
Keep going.
After the major media's decisions to print the names, photos, and addresses of the juvenile suspects.
They did what to these children?
Print the names, photos, and addresses of the juvenile suspects. They and their families received serious threats.
Of course. Because a white woman, blonde hair, maybe blue-green eyes, hazel eyes, why not, right? Part of a banking institution, right? A serious and horrendous crime took place and occurred to her, right? She was left in the most gross condition imaginable that you wouldn't want your own women in your family to be found in or to go through. These families of these young children who were innocent were receiving serious death threats.
And just real quick, the paragraph we skipped talked about how they ignored the protocol of not even releasing the names of juvenile suspects.
Listen, you're not supposed to do that. All juvenile suspects, their names, unless they're being tried as an adult, you will not know who they are. Keep going.
Other residents living at the Schomburg Plaza, where 4 suspects lived, were also threatened. Because of this, editors...
So people who had nothing to do with it, they just lived in the same building, were being threatened with violence as well.
Because of this, editors of the City Sun and the Amsterdam News chose to use Miley's name in their continuing coverage of the events. Reverend Calvin O. Butts of the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem, who came to support the 5 suspects, said to the New York Times, "The first thing you do in the United States of America when a white woman is raped is round up a bunch of black youths, and I think that's what happened here."
You know why he said that? Because that's what led to the unaliving of Emmett Till.
Right.
That's what has led to the unaliving of many countless of untold stories that happened to Black, Hispanic, and Native American men.
Right.
And young boys throughout the history of this country. Their stories we will never hear about because they have been forgotten and gone untold, of Black, Hispanic, and Native American men being unalived by white mobs due to some false allegation that occurred to a white woman. And he has the right state of mind to think this, because this is exactly what happened. A crime happened to a white woman. A heinous crime happened to a white woman. Only Black and brown people could be responsible for this.
Right.
Keep going.
In most media accounts of the incident at that time, Miley was simply referred to as the Central Park jogger, but 2 local TV stations violated the media policy of not publicly identifying the victims of sex crimes.
So these media companies violated these things. Keep going.
And released her name in the days immediately following the attack. 2 newspapers aimed at the African American community, the City Sun and the Amsterdam News, and the Black-owned talk radio station WLIB continued to cover the case as it progressed. Their editors said this was in response to the media having publicized the names and personal information of the 5 suspects.
So the City Sun, the Amsterdam News, and the Black-owned talk radio WLIB were trying to combat what these other media outlets were doing by revealing the information, the addresses, the identity of these innocent children, by talking about the development of the case, of this case, right? Go down to the next paragraph on May 1st.
On May 1st, 1989, Donald Trump.
Who?
Donald Trump.
The guy that's in court right now. Who?
Donald Trump.
The last president we had.
Donald Trump.
Donald J. Trump. Keep going.
At the time, a real estate magnate.
You're fired. Y'all remember that on Fox? I think it was on Fox, right? You're fired. That balding white man. Keep going.
Called for the return of the death penalty.
He did what?
Called for the return of the death penalty for murder in full-page advertisements published in all 4 of the city's major newspapers.
So, upon hearing that these 5 young teenagers, all of color, upon hearing that they were the ones responsible for this crime, this offense against this white woman, and learning about the conditions that she was left in, he decided to go to the New York Post, the New York Times, the Daily News, and whatever, or maybe the Wall Street Journal at this time, and get a full spread advertisement on how they should bring back the death penalty. And this is what it said. Bring back the death penalty. Bring back our police. Continue reading the paragraph.
Trump said he wanted the criminals of every age to be afraid.
Of every age. It doesn't matter if you were 6 years old and you stole a 10-cent pack of gum. You should be afraid because you can face the death penalty. It doesn't matter if you were 87 years old and you were just trying to get some what do you call it? What do elderly people buy? You were just trying to get your daily medication for your arthritis. If you were to steal it, commit a crime, you should be afraid because now you are a criminal and the death penalty should be something you fear. Let's go to streaming. Let's see if we got any comments, any questions in the show. Oh, we got a bunch of stuff. Let's see.
Brothers and sisters, various brothers and sisters saying shalom.
But I'm not Captain Tazariak. Keep going. Scroll back up. Let's see. Shalom. Kartazah, Meech Rogue, shalom. Yakar, shalom. Saraya Kwa, shalom. Richard, shalom. I'm not Captain Zakar either, but thank you. That's a great man as well. Precious, shalom. Princess Nakaf. Shalom, sis. How you doing? Angelo Antonio. Shalom. How you doing, Angelo? What's going on? If you have any questions on this subject, please feel free to type them in, all right? All right, let's get back to class. Go ahead.
The advertisement, which cost an estimated US $85,000, equivalent to $201,000 in
So he spent
2022,
$85,000 just to have this inside each four of the major newspapers in New York. Keep going.
said, in part, Mayor Koch had stated that hate and rancor should be removed from our hearts. I do not think so. I want to hate these muggers and murderers.
The what?
The muggers and murderers.
Mayor Koch called these 5 teenagers what?
Muggers
And
and
what else?
murderers.
And what else?
Murderers.
He called them muggers.
Trump.
No, it's talking about. Oh, sorry. Donald Trump disagreed with Mayor Koch and said that he wants these muggers and, quote, murderers, people who unalive other people. He hates them. Donald J. Trump hates the 5 innocent young teenagers that were wrongfully convicted and incarcerated and were labeled the Century Park 5. He still hates them. He has yet to apologize to Wise, Salam, Santana, McCrae.
Right.
He has yet to apologize to any of them for his actions. Keep going.
They should be forced to suffer.
You wanted these innocent teenagers to suffer for doing nothing wrong. Keep going.
Yes, Mayor Koch, I want to hate these murderers and I always will.
He will what?
I want to hate these murderers and I always will.
Donald Trump still hates them. He says it here. He always will hate these innocent men of color. Keep going.
How can our great society tolerate the continued brutalization of its citizens by crazed misfits? Criminals must be told that their civil liberties end when an attack on our safety begins.
Crazy. Scroll down. Let's get to the supposedly happy ending. Keep going now. Yeah, you want to see something?
Oh, real quick. They actually asked him in recent years if he wanted to apologize or anything, and he doubled down and said that there's 2 sides to that, even after they were exonerated.
He still will not apologize. Keep going.
A court
Go down to where it says the criminal actions.
On May 10th, 1989, Lopez, McCrae, Richardson, Salam, Santana, and Wise were indicted with attempted murder and other charges in the attack on and rape of the female jogger and additional charges related to the attack of David Lewis, the attack and robbery of John Laughlin, and riot. The prosecution arranged to try the 6 defendants in the Miley case in 2 separate groups. This enabled them to control the order in which certain evidence would be introduced to the court. Each pleaded not guilty. The families of Lopez, Richardson, and Salam were able to make the $25,000 bail imposed by the court. The other 2 youths under 16 were returned to a juvenile facility to be held there until trial. Classified as an adult at 16, Corey Wise was separated from the others and held in an adult jail at Rikers Island until trial.
And we all know that they're trying to get Rikers Island to be closed and shut down because of all the horror stories.
Right.
If you don't know about Khalif Browder,
Right.
look him up.
Right.
He was another black young man that was wrongfully incarcerated for over 3 years, for just about 3 years of going through pain, torture, and suffering at Rikers Island, only to be released 2 years after that and ended up taking his own life over that whole 3-year ordeal. Right? Scroll all the way down. Keep going, keep going, keep going. These young children who were innocent had to spend years in prison, had to go through so much trauma while in prison. Keep going. Stop. Wait. Go up a little more. Up. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Stop right there. Let's read about their lives when they started to come out of prison. Keep going.
After being released from prison in September 1996, McCrae moved to Maryland and became a forklift operator. He is married, has 6 children, and lives and works in Georgia. Richardson acted as an advocate with Santana and Salam to reform New York State's criminal justice practices, advocating methods to prevent false confessions and eyewitness misidentifications. He also participated in a series of talks on criminal justice reform and wrongful convictions. Salam became a board member of the Innocence Project and has advocated for criminal justice reform, particularly for juveniles. In 2016, he received a Lifetime Achievement Award from President Barack Obama. In 2017, he and Fernando Bermudez penned an op-ed for the New York Daily News in support of 2 criminal justice reform measures offered by then-Governor Andrew Cuomo.
So Salam did a bunch of good stuff afterwards. Go down, scroll down a little bit more. Go to Santana.
Santana was released from prison in December 1995 and was out of prison for 6 months before he was found guilty of possession of crack cocaine in 1998.
So after being falsely imprisoned for several years, after all the oppression and horror and turmoil, he finally gets out of prison in 95, and lo and behold, what does a teenager know how to do once they come out of jail? You went into jail at the age of 15. You come out at the age of 20, 21. What skills do you have? What quality or level of education that you have that can help make your life better? He turned to selling drugs. What else could someone his age, of his experience, of the trauma that he gone through, what else could they have done? Keep going.
And reincarcerated for a term of 3.5 to 7 years. He was released in 2002 when the prosecutor, agreeing that his sentence had been higher due to his then vacated conviction for raping Miley.
So the reason why they gave him such high sentence was because he was recently vacated. The charges were dropped. He was exonerated from the crimes that had taken place to this white jogger. And so what did they end up doing?
Reduced it to the 18 to 48 months than it would typically have been given to a first-time offender.
But he still went to jail. Keep going.
Santana started a clothing company, Park Madison NYC, and donates a portion of Park Madison NYC's proceeds to the Innocence Project.
Go down to the next paragraph.
After his release, Wise changed his first name to Corey. He found work as a construction worker and for a time as an office cleaner for Reverend Al Sharpton. Wise remained in New York City, where he works as a speaker and justice reform activist. He donated $190,000 of his 2014 settlement to the chapter of the Innocence Project at the University of Colorado Law School.
Go to the next paragraph.
The 5 made the news in late March and early April 2023 after Trump was indicted on felony charges of falsifying business records in an alleged hush money payment scheme and cover-up before the 2016 presidential election. New York City Council candidate Yusuf Salam issued a one-word statement.
What did he say?
Karma.
Karma. There you go, Mr. J. Trump, because now you're in court facing crimes of your own. Let's go to back to StreamYard, Babu Shah, and we can drop this particular article. I want to go into a story that's pretty similar in the Bible, right? Maybe you've heard of this person, maybe you have not. Joseph, right? Let's go to Genesis chapter 39. Let's read about Joseph and him being falsely incarcerated, like these 5 young men of color were falsely incarcerated.
Genesis chapter 39 and verse 1. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, brought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither.
Just to give you a little backstory, Joseph's brothers, became very cruel to him because of Joseph being very young, naive, and bragged about being father's favorite and the visions that he was getting from the Lord, right? His brothers didn't like that, so in a long story short, they beat him up, roughed him up, left him in a ditch, and then sold their own brother into slavery to the Ishmaelites. Now these Ishmaelites traveled to Egypt and sold him off to the Egyptians. Keep going.
And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand.
So right now, Joseph is working for this Egyptian, and is doing great things in his master's house. Right? Keep going.
And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house and all that he had put into his hand.
So Joseph gained full control of his master's house, made sure everything was running perfectly. Everything was in top-notch order condition, from the money to the food, everything. His master was pleased with him. Keep going.
And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field.
So the Egyptian, everything he owned was increased because the Lord was with Joseph, and Joseph was doing a phenomenal work. Keep going.
And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored.
Joseph was an innocent man. Joseph was a law-abiding person living in the land of Egypt. Keep going.
And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife,
His what?
his master's wife,
This whore
cast her eyes upon Joseph.
had lust for Joseph. Even though she was already married, even though she had a husband, she sexually lusted after Joseph, a goodly person who was well favored. Keep going.
And she said, lie with me.
And she told Joseph, listen, I want to sleep with you. Have sex with me. Keep going.
But he refused.
What did Joseph do?
He refused.
Joseph said, no, I will not have sex with you. First and foremost, Abraham raised Joseph to follow the laws of God. Jacob raised Joseph to follow the laws of God. And committing adultery is not something that Joseph was allowed to do. Right? Keep going.
And said unto his master's wife.
And he told this whore, his master's wife,
behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand.
Listen, my master there's no want that he needs from me. I have done everything to make my master grow in might and riches and power. He's given me responsibility to take care of all this for him. Keep going.
There is none greater in this house than I.
There is no other person greater than I in this house.
Neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee.
And he has treated me extremely well. Why would I betray him by sleeping with you? Keep going.
Because thou art his wife.
You are his wife. You are his woman. Why would I betray my master? Why would I betray the person who feeds me, clothes me, gives me praise, gives me power? Why would I betray him and sleep with you, his wife? Keep going.
How then can I do this great wickedness?
How do you think I'll do this wickedness, this evil act? Do you really think I would commit such an evil act? Keep going.
And sin against God.
And do what?
And sin against God.
And this is why you know that Joseph was taught by his father Jacob, right, who was taught by his father Isaac, right, who was taught by his father Abraham. Adultery is a sin according to God. Sleeping with another man's woman is a sin according to God. Sleeping with another man, even though you already have a husband, is a sin. And this wife of this Egyptian, who's obviously a whore, wanted to sleep with Joseph and get him to sin and commit an atrocity and betrayal of trust to his master. Keep going.
And it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day.
What did she do?
Spake to Joseph day by day.
Every day she's telling Joseph, listen, I want you to lay it on me. I want you to lay it on me. I need you. I have eyes for you, my husband. Forget my husband. I want you. I want that matah. She wanted that rod. Keep going.
That he hearkened not unto her, to lie by her or to be with her.
And Joseph's like, listen, I don't deal with whores.
Right.
You must got me confused. I don't mess around with city girls. I don't believe in hot girl summer. I'm not a fan of Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion. Right. I'm not a fan of none of that. I don't go to Sin City or the Gentleman's Club. I don't be on OnlyFans and Only Pages and Back Pages. Listen, I don't like whores.
Right.
And I don't sleep with women who belong to another man. Keep going.
And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business.
Now, days gone by and Joseph, was going about his business, going into his master's house to take care of his duty. Keep going.
And there was none of the men of the house there within.
And no one else was in the house but Joseph. Keep going.
And she caught him by his garment.
What she do?
She caught him by his garment.
She grabbed him up. You know how you see in movies when a woman is overly aggressive and wants a man, she'll trap him in a bathroom or put him up against the wall or grab him and won't let him go? That's what she did to him. She grabbed him by his garment. Keep going.
Saying, lie with me.
She said, you better give me that. You better lay the pipe down. Keep going.
And he left his garment in her hand.
And you know what he did? He said, "Witch, you are crazy." He took his garment off while she's still holding it and grabbing it. And what did he do?
And fled.
And what?
And fled.
He ran away from this whore, this deep ditch, this pit that causes death and suffering. A whore. Keep going.
And got him out.
And he got out of that house. He said, listen, I'd rather run naked and be seen running naked than commit such a sin according to the eyes of my God. And so he snatched that garment off with her still holding it, and he ran out that joint. Keep going.
And it came to pass when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth.
And she must have been crying, trying to kiss him and touch him all over. She realized that she's just holding on to his garment, his shirt, his pants. Keep going.
That she called unto the men of her house.
She did what?
Called unto the men of her house.
She called the police. She screamed, help, help, I'm injured.
Right.
She lied. Keep going.
And spake unto them, saying, see, he hath brought in an Hebrew unto us to mock us.
And she said, listen, he brought in this N-word. Y'all know what I'm trying to say? N-I-G-G-E-R. My husband brought in this disgraceful black man, this disgraceful Hispanic man, this dishonorable Native American man, this untrustworthy Hebrew. And he mocks us. Keep going.
He came in unto me to lie with me.
He tried to touch me. He sexually violated me. He tried to sexually offend me. He tried to take my goodies and see what my milkshake does. That's what she is claiming Joseph tried to do to her. Keep going.
And I cried with a loud voice.
And I called out with a loud voice, help, help. He's trying to sexually violate me. This Hebrew is touching me. He's trying to take my purity from me. Keep going.
And it came to pass when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried.
And when he heard me crying out for help,
that he left his garment with me.
He decided to just take off his clothes and leave it with me.
And fled.
And ran.
And got him out.
And left the house.
And she laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home.
And she held onto his clothes as proof of what she said actually happened, which didn't happen until the master of the house came. Keep going.
And she spake unto him according to these words.
And this lying wench, keep going,
saying, the Hebrew servant,
Joseph,
which thou hast brought unto us,
the one that you brought into this house,
came in unto me to mock me.
tried to have sex with me and take me by force. He tried to sexually violate me, your wife. Keep going.
And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out.
And as he's trying to take advantage of me and sexually violate me, while he's taking off his pants, while he's kicking off his Nike ACGs and unzipping his True Religion jeans and taking off his Ralph Lauren polo shirt, while he's hearing me cry out, he decides to leave all his clothes here and run out naked. Keep going.
And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, after this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled.
And after he heard everything that his wife told to her, he was furious. He was out for blood and out for revenge for the crime that happened to his wife that never actually happened. His wife was just a whore.
Right.
Keep going.
And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison.
And what did Joseph's master do?
Put him into the prison.
They caught him and threw him into the prison.
A place where the king's prisoners were bound.
Where what?
Where the king's prisoners were bound.
The king's prisoners. The prison that the kings really hated. He threw Joseph in there with them.
And he was there in the prison.
And he was there in prison. Just like Santana was, just like Salam was, just like Wise was, just like McCrae was. They were all thrown in prison for crimes they did not commit. Just like Joseph in the Bible, these 5 young teenagers were wrongfully convicted and wrongfully incarcerated for crimes they did not commit, over lies, over false allegations, over extreme horrendous conditions during interrogation. They were lied on. And this husband of this Egyptian whore believed her. Keep going.
But the Lord was with Joseph.
The Lord was with Joseph. He still protected Joseph even during this great trial Joseph was going through.
And showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison.
So the person who was in charge of the prison found great things within Joseph, became friendly and kind to Joseph because the Lord made that happen. Keep going.
And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it.
And so he let Joseph basically run the prison. Keep going.
The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper.
So if the floors needed to be cleaned, he knew Joseph would handle it. If something was happening, fights were happening, Joseph would resolve it. Joseph was basically doing what he did in his master's house, in the prison, but for the keeper of the prison. Next chapter. Genesis chapter 40.
Verse 1. And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord the king of Egypt.
So the butler and the baker of the king were thrown into prison with Joseph. Keep going.
And Pharaoh was wroth against 2 of his officers, against the chief of the butlers and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them in ward in the house of the captain of the guard, into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them. And they continued a season in ward.
And Joseph was put in charge of the baker and what else? The baker
butler.
and the butler. That was the chief baker and the chief butler to the Pharaoh. Joseph was put in charge of them. Joseph took care of them while in prison. Keep going.
And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, which were bound in the prison.
Now the butler and the baker had dreams. Keep going.
And Joseph came in unto them in the morning and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad.
And both the baker and the butler were very sad when Joseph came to go check on them.
And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his lord's house, saying, Wherefore look ye so sadly today?
Why y'all looking so sad? Cheer up.
And they said unto him, We have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it.
We both have dreams and we don't know what they mean. We have no one to interpret what these dreams that we had mean, and we're very concerned about them. Keep going.
And Joseph said unto them, do not interpretations belong to God?
Don't God interpret these dreams?
Tell me them, I pray
Don't you have to go to a man of God to understand these interpretations? That's why for all you women out there that have these dreams, you need to go to a man of God to get the understanding of these dreams. For all you men out there that have these dreams, that think you're going to be great and powerful, you need to go to the men of God to get these dreams interpreted. Because 99% of these dreams you have are nothing. They're just vain. They're just you watching too much horror stories mixed with Jason Bourne identity movies. They're just dreams. They mean nothing. But go to a priest of the Lord, and he'll let you know what these dreams actually mean. Keep going.
And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph, and said to him, in my dream, behold, a vine was before me. And in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said unto him, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head, and restore thee unto thy place, and thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand, after the former manner when thou wast his butler.
So the butler told Joseph his dream, and Joseph told him exactly what the dream was, and told him in 3 days, listen, the Pharaoh is going to come for you, and is going to restore you to your rightful place. Keep going.
But think on me when it shall be well with thee.
But listen, when all this happens, and you get restored to your former position in Pharaoh's house, remember me. Remember how kind I was to you. Remember all the things I did for you. Remember the dream that I just interpreted for you. Remember I told you what will happen and how you would be restored to your former glory. Remember, I helped you. Keep going.
And show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house.
And when this happens, remember me and talk to Pharaoh about me. Tell him that I interpreted your dreams. Tell the Pharaoh I can do the same for him. So I can get out of this prison, just like you will in 3 days. Keep going.
For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon.
Listen, because I was sold into slavery. I was taken from my friends, my family, my loved ones, my land, and then I was thrown into this prison because of a whore lying on me. Keep going.
When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, I also was in my dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head. And in the uppermost basket there was of all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head.
And now the baker, happy about the interpretation that Joseph just gave the butler, says, listen, how about this dream? Tell me what this dream means. Keep going.
And Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from off thee, and shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh from off thee.
Listen, in 3 days is not looking good for you. The Pharaoh is gonna have you face the guillotine, gonna hang you from a tree. Pharaoh is going to unalive you in 3 days, and birds are gonna pick at your brain. Keep going.
And it came to pass the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, So in
3 days on Pharaoh's birthday,
that he made a feast unto all his servants. And he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker amongst his servants. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again, and he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand.
So he restored the butler to his rightful place as the chief butler. Keep going.
But he hanged the chief baker.
But the baker faced the prediction, the interpretation, the prophecy that Joseph gave onto him, which was his demise, his life being put to an end. Keep going.
as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him.
However, once the butler was put back into position, him being all happy and everything, forgot about Joseph, who is still wrongfully incarcerated and wrongfully convicted. Keep going. Next chapter.
Chapter 41 and verse 1. And it came to pass at the end of 2 full years.
So
that-
Joseph was in prison. He's already serving time in prison, and now another 2 full years came by. Keep going.
that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine and fat-fleshed, and they fed in a meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river.
So listen, Pharaoh's having a bunch of dreams, right? They're pretty bad dreams. Keep scrolling down. There's the part when he talks to. Wait, let's go back up. Hold on. Scroll up. Let's hold on. Go to verse 9. Start at verse 9.
Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh,
So
saying,
Pharaoh's saying, telling people I have these horrible dreams. I don't know what they mean. Verse 9.
I do remember my faults this day. Pharaoh was wroth with his servants and put me in ward in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. And we dreamed a dream in one night, I and he. We dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And there was there with us a young man, an Hebrew, servant to the captain of the guard. And we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dream he did interpret. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so it was. Me he restored unto mine office, and him he hanged.
So now the butler remembered Joseph, and he's telling Pharaoh, listen, when, that unfortunate event that caused me and the baker to go into prison, there was this Hebrew there, this black man, this Hispanic man that was there, that was able to interpret the dreams that myself and the baker had, and everything he said about our dreams came true. The baker was put in his grave, and I was restored back to my position. You should speak to him. I advise speaking to that Hebrew. Keep going.
Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph.
And what did Pharaoh do?
And called Joseph.
He went and called from Joseph to come from the prison. Keep going.
And they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And he shaved himself and changed his raiment and came in unto Pharaoh.
And so he cleaned himself up. Keep going.
And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, In my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river.
So he's telling Joseph, I heard you can interpret dreams. I want you to interpret my dream. And Joseph said, It's not me who's interpreting dreams. It's God, the Lord of my people, who's allowing this information to come through me. So he's telling him his dream. Scroll down. Keep scrolling. Hold on. Scroll back up. Start right there, verse 25.
And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, The dream of Pharaoh is one. God hath showed Pharaoh what he is about to do.
So all the dreams Pharaoh was having, Joseph says, all your dreams are the same thing. God is showing you, my God is going to show you, is showing you in your dreams what's going to happen, what's about to happen. Keep going.
The 7 good kine are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kind that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine.
So he's telling him you're going to have 7 years of great harvest and greatness of wealth and food. And then after that, you're going to have 7 years of famine, great pain and suffering in the land.
This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. Behold, There come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt, and there shall arise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land, and the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be very grievous. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice, it is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass.
And Joseph said, and because you had this dream twice, it's because God is going to let this happen. God is making this happen, and you're dreaming about it right now. Keep going.
Now, therefore, let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt.
Now listen, what I advise you to do is find a man who's going to be wise, that will be able to help alleviate and take care of all this that's about to happen to you and your land and your kingdom.
Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years, and let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities, and that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh. And
so Joseph gave Pharaoh a strategic plan. He basically created FEMA for Pharaoh, right? He gave him a plan of what to do to prevent this from happening, how to prepare for this happening. That way, the people on the land don't expire. That way, the people can still survive and eat and prosper somewhat. Keep going.
And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is?
And Pharaoh, after talking to Joseph, after hearing the plan, after him interpreting the dreams, after him having evidence that his past interpretations were real, after Joseph giving him a whole blueprint and a layout on how to stay alive, he looks at Joseph, then turns around and asks everyone, oh my gosh, who can we turn to? Who is a man of God that we can find to take command and help us in the situation, even though he's talking to him already? Keep going.
And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, for as much as God hath showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art.
Listen, I've been asking around, and I finally come to the conclusion that you are the only man fit for this role. Keep going.
Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy words shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou.
I'm going to put you in the highest position of power over my entire empire. I will sit on the throne and be king, and you will be my right hand, ruling for me to make sure that the people, everyone living in the land of Egypt in my kingdom, survives. Keep going.
And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, see, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had. And they cried before him, bow the knee. And he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt.
Perfect. Stop. And Joseph was put in a seat of power, right? But what I want to stress is that this whole topic has been about wrongful convictions, wrongful incarcerations. Just like the Century Park Five, these young teenagers were wrongfully incarcerated and wrongfully convicted and faced horrible conditions throughout their whole time of incarceration and being accused of a crime they didn't commit. Joseph went through the same thing, right? Now, I want you to go to one of the articles that talked about wrongful convictions. I think it might be the 3rd or 4th tab. Let's see the next one. Yeah, share that one. Can they see this? Let's look if there's any comments. Okay, still the same comments. All right, go share this. No, right there, perfect. Go back. Perfect. Now, this is from the Equal Justice Initiative, right? Scroll back up. It says wrongful convictions. Read, please.
Thousands of people have been wrongfully convicted across the country in a system defined by official indifference to innocence and error.
Thousands of people have been wrongfully convicted. Keep going up. Because there's so much indifference about people claiming to be innocent and finding out they're innocent, and then also the error in the manner of how they're being convicted falsely and incarcerated incorrectly. Let's see the first statistic that's right there.
3,175 plus.
So over 3,000 people, right? Keep going.
Exonerations since 1989 in the National Registry of Exonerations.
So if you look up the National Registry of Exonerations, which I believe we also have the other tab, right? It says since 1989, since the time of the Central Park 5, over 3,000 exonerations, over 3,000 people have been exonerated, have been cleared of all the crimes that were held against them and freed, right? Because they were wrongfully convicted and wrongfully incarcerated. Keep going.
375 people exonerated through DNA evidence since 1989.
Since 1989, 375 people have been freed, found not guilty, and had all criminal charges dropped and reversed and exonerated due to the use of DNA evidence. Next.
27,200 plus years exonerated people spent in prison for crimes they did not commit.
So all the people that have been exonerated, the amount of time that each one spent in prison wrongfully, falsely, right? All their time, when you add them all up, equals to over 27,000 years that they all spent in prison falsely combined. Next.
44%. Only 44% of the 95 conviction integrity units in the U.S. have recorded exonerations.
So the integrity units that are in the United States, right? The 95 out of 95 of them, only 44% have recorded exonerations, right? Scroll down. Let's read this.
There are more innocent people in our jails and prisons today than ever before. The rate of exonerations continues to rise, revealing an unreliable system of criminal justice, a lack of accountability for police and prosecutors.
We need more accountability from the police force. Now, I know there's so many movements, defund the police, we hate the police. Listen, here in the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge, our official stance on all law enforcement, especially here in the New York for the NYPD, the New York Police Department, we do not hate the police. We hate the crimes that the police are responsible for. Again, we do not hate the police. We hate the corruption that takes place in law enforcement, not only in New York, but all over the country. So I repeat, for anyone listening, for all you DEA agents, CIA agents, all the feds that come knocking on my door and wanting to interview me, we do not hate the police. We hate the crimes that have been committed by members of the police. We do not hate the police. We hate the corruption that has been proven and shown and hidden to be in law enforcement of every level throughout this entire country. Keep going. Reliance
on junk science and mistaken eyewitnesses.
Listen, the accountability of this junk science. Let's check this hair follicle and all this other stuff. These junk science and mistaken eyewitnesses. People saying they saw something and saw someone when they really did not.
Right.
Someone describing someone, it looked like this, but in actuality, this person looked completely different.
Right.
Keep going.
And the indigent defense crisis are major contributors to wrongful convictions that have undermined.
And the weak defense that is allotted to people who are wrongfully convicted is a crisis. The fact that you have defense attorneys who are overworked,
Right.
having to deal with multiple cases, not giving their full A game to the cases that they have to deal with, that's a contributing factor to why there are so many Black, Hispanic, and Native American people wrongfully incarcerated.
Right.
Keep going.
That have undermined the credibility of our system and ruined the lives of innocent men and women.
They've ruined the lives of families, of dreams that children have had. Keep going. Let's look up some of the. Sorry, you scroll down. Let's look up at some of the causes to people being wrongfully incarcerated and wrongfully convicted of crimes.
Exonerations tell us a lot about what causes wrongful convictions. More than half of wrongful convictions can be traced to witnesses who lied in court or made false accusations. In 2018, a record number of exonerations involved misconduct by government officials.
What?
Misconduct by government officials.
In 2018, a record number of people freed and exonerated from crimes that they say they committed was due to the misconduct of government officials. That means the corruption of police, the corruption of the prosecution, right? That means the wrongdoings of police, prosecution. Any type of misconduct that you can correlate to the professionalism that should be present amongst our judicial system. In 2018, the numbers were astronomically high and were the causes of many exonerations that year. Keep going.
Other leading causes of wrongful convictions include mistaken eyewitness identifications, false or misleading forensic science, and jailhouse informants.
So mistaken eyewitness identifications, right? So there's this guy, Detective Nathaniel Ray,
Right.
who changed his name to Nathaniel Ben Israel, was an NYPD, I think, second grade detective, something like that, with the NYPD, who coerced false eyewitness testimonies from people that he gathered to participate in a lineup to incarcerate two brothers and imprison them wrongfully. Now, this Detective Nathaniel Ray or Detective Nathaniel Ben Israel is now the leader of a certain organization that also treats Black, Hispanic, and Native American people the same way he did when he was on the police force.
Right.
Mistaken eyewitness identification. Keep going. What else did it say?
Faulty forensics also lead to wrongful convictions. Many forensic techniques aren't scientifically validated.
Let's learn about them. These junk science.
These junk science techniques include hair microscopy.
Yeah, checking out the different hair strands. Keep going.
Bite mark comparisons.
Trying to compare bite marks.
Firearm tool mark analysis. Shoe print comparisons.
Yes, because just because I wear a size 9 doesn't mean that the pressure I have on the ball of my foot is going to match the pressure of the size 9 Adidas that's on the top of my foot. Junk science. Keep going.
Innocent people have been convicted because forensic lab workers made errors in testing, testified inaccurately about their results, or fabricated results.
Like that I think it was an Indian woman.
Oh, yeah.
What's her name? Let's see if we can find this monster. This Indian woman, forensic analysis, right, was falsifying so many tests and falsely wrongfully convict innocent people. This Indian woman was an absolute monster and an absolute devil for her part and prosecuting and incarcerating innocent men because of her crimes. Right? Let's see. Alexa, you got it?
I'm gonna pull it up. We'll find it. Slovakia.
Alexa, who was the forensic scientist that fabricated DNA evidence?
Sorry, I don't have an answer for that.
I bet. Her father probably programmed you. Let's see if we can get that. It's okay. You Google it. You find it out. This Indian woman was a monster. Keep reading.
Innocent people have been convicted.
2015.
In 2015, EJI won the exoneration and release of Anthony Ray Hinton, who spent 30 years on Alabama's death row after being wrongfully convicted of capital murder based on a faulty bullet match, and Benaiah Dandridge, who spent 20 years in prison after being wrongfully convicted based on an erroneous fingerprint match.
Listen, it's a sad thing when we expect the justice system to be fair. And it's also disheartening to learn that being Black, Hispanic, or Native American here in America, you are not afforded the same rights, the same levels of, how should I say this? The same levels that our counterparts, like white people, are held to. We're not afforded those same luxuries. We're not innocent until proven guilty. We tend to be guilty until we can find some type of proof that may lead to our innocence.
Annie Ducon.
Annie Ducon, that monster of a forensic scientist, Annie Ducon, who helped falsely incarcerate and imprison several. What was the number? I know it was like at least in the hundreds that she helped give faulty information and evidence for and testified.
Up to 34,000 cases.
Listen, I was trying to be nice, but that monster was in the thousands. 34,000 cases she helped provide false information for using her junk science and fabricating and lying on evidence to help put away innocent people. All right, we go back to StreamYard. Okay. So we still got a couple of people with us here. You guys have any questions in the room? Any thoughts? Aisha, what are your thoughts? Considering you were there with us when we went to this rally.
Khan, and what was so deep about the bill that they're pushing down there is they want to step it up from just beyond acknowledging wrongful convictions that are overturned. They want to acknowledge the fact that guilty pleas can be coerced by a number of factors, by just the general pressure that our people face. And so it's a step in the right direction. But of course, it's just there's so much that goes on in this system against our people.
Thomas, what do you think?
Well, on 110th Street, they did offer them a nice gate with their names on it. It's not rated 5, so at least they got that.
At least that's nothing.
Right.
That's nothing. What does a plaque do for the horrors that you witnessed and gone through?
It's almost like an insult.
Yeah, we're gonna put this in memory of you so everyone knows what happened to you. How does that help me? How does splitting $41 million between 5 people help me with all the memories I missed? Right? Raymond Santana came out of jail in 95 and went back to jail in 98 for dealing crack cocaine. Because what else would he know how to do? Right. He missed out on an education. He missed out on developing vital and important job skills. Can't seek employment because he was just released from prison. Who's going to hire a prisoner back in the 90s? Right? So it's a sad thing. All right, so before we leave out, we're going to make sure we play this last video. Go to the YouTube. Not that one. You can close that one out. Wait, stop. You can close that out. You can play that video. So share that tab. And you can play that video.
Well, they are called the Central Park Five. In 1989, they were teenagers and were sent to prison for rape of a jogger here in New York. The men served 6 to 13 years before their convictions were thrown out.
Yesterday, they reached a $40 million settlement with New York City. But as Michelle Miller shows us, that money can't buy back the time the men lost.
25 years after being convicted for a crime he didn't commit, Kevin Richardson, one of the men known as the Central Park Five, feels vindicated.
Now it feels great to have a voice, because in '89 we didn't have one. All we wanted to tell y'all that we didn't do it.
In 1989, Richardson and 4 other teenagers between 14 and 16 years of age were arrested for the brutal rape of a 28-year-old white female jogger in New York City's Central Park.
She was dragged down the bushes near what is called the Lock, where she was beaten and sexually assaulted.
The crime drew national headlines, polarizing an already divided city along racial lines. Raymond Santana served 5 years in prison. Is this over? Is the page turned?
I still get up every morning saying, all right, we got to go out there and fight. It's like we haven't even been exonerated. You know, that's how I view it.
The victim was left for dead. She had no memory of the attack. There was no DNA evidence linking them to the crime and no witnesses. The case was built on videotaped confessions. Yusuf Salam was 15 years old.
I met Raymond Santana in prison.
Yeah.
We didn't know each other.
We didn't know each other.
And they painted this picture as if we all knew each other. We all got together and said, hey, man, let's go hang out and do this. And that's not what happened.
What do you say to the people out there who just don't believe you're innocent?
You know, these people had their mind fixated on us being guilty. We have tried everything we possibly could to prove our innocence, and our innocence has been proven.
In 2002, 12 years after they were sentenced, serial rapist and murderer Mateus Reyes confessed, saying he acted alone. DNA evidence corroborated his story, and a judge threw out the convictions.
This is a victory story now. This is a perseverance story. This is a story about fighting the good fight and winning. And this is the story about the city doing a good thing.
22 states now have laws requiring interrogations of minors be recorded. 15 of those states passed the law after the Central Park Five were exonerated in 2002. New York isn't one of them. For CBS This Morning Saturday, Michelle Miller, New York.
You can close out that YouTube thing before another video plays. And with that, this has been the ISUPK Monday history class, not only on the Central Park Five, but also on wrongful convictions. I'm Precinct Officer Shargapan of the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge under Commanding General Yohana, and we will continue to teach Black, Hispanic, and Native American people who they are according to the Bible. Shalom, Israel.